G'day everyone. Welcome to our final in the week of the first full week of Spa Takeaways. This feels like a big effort in terms of just coordinating people and getting people to engage and talk, but we're loving doing it. And I have to just give a couple of quick shout outs because there are a couple of guys here who are running the whole show here at Tribal Ape. And I want to thank them very much because they're making it all happen for us. And also another big shout out for John Hughes at Fox Studios, who's helping to make all this happen as well. So we're getting a lot of great feedback about how it's working for people to connect and to keep relevant and connected to what's going on, and to also provide a lot of information that's hopefully good at a point when we're all not necessarily in each other's faces and spaces as much as we are used to being in this industry. I had an interview this morning with a journalist, and we were talking how much our industry is dependent on human interaction because we love each other, we nurture each other, we work together, and we need to trust each other in many of the projects that we work on. And there's a real fine line between the business relationships and the personal relationships. And I feel like our whole industry is quite a big family actually, and there's a lot of business relationships that have always split into personal relationships. So for us, it's not just that we're shutting down our industry, it's also that we're shutting down most of our personal relationships through our industry through this process. So I'm finding that really hard. I appreciate all the feedback. We are going to, and I will be taking questions if there's some that come through. Hopefully the team are going to feed me them. There's a lot of interest in talking to the guest today, which is Kylie Munnich, the CEO of Screen Queensland. And I say the crossover between business and personal relationships because I know and love Kylie from a very long set of exchanges with you in many different roles, and I was delighted when you got this role. You probably didn't think you'd be thrown in as much of a deep end as you've been thrown in, courtesy of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. But I'm interested in seeing, having a long chat with you about how you're finding the role, but also how Queensland's operating in this space and how Screen Queensland's thinking about how to help people. Where are you're with your family at the moment? You've got a routine. Tell me what's going on for you.
Oh, thank you, Matt. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you on behalf of Screen Queensland and to everyone out there who's listening. I'm working from home like a lot of people who are lucky to be working are, and occupying that space with a teenager who is studying on doing online schooling, and a husband who is working from home. So we're just navigating that. Just before I went online with you, I asked my son to stop streaming video because he's probably sucking the internet out of the whole house. And in fact, right now, my image of you has frozen. So hopefully you can still hear me. My routine, my personal routine is I'm trying to take good care of myself and my family so that then I'm in a good place to be able to help all in the Queensland screen industry who are hurting so much. So. Yeah. I'm doing my best to look after my own health and well-being. Every day is a lot of phone calls, a lot of teleconferences, a lot of Zoom meetings as we try and react to what the industry needs right now from us.
I was talking to you as the pandemic was sort of being announced, and we were originally going to do a breakfast together. I think I've lost track of what week we're in, but it was probably earlier this week actually, and we were talking, can this go ahead? Oh, of course it can, early on. And of course now it just seems like the doing at this point. You had a strategy early on to, I think, break the team into teams, is that right? And that was stage one, but then you realised soon, I think you had to shut the office down. So you were ahead of the curve, I think, from what I was picking in terms of what you needed to do to kind of keep the organisation operating. And I mean, got to shut down, you've got to figure out ways to work at home. How was it? Was it straightforward or was it a very difficult thing?
Because we're a government agency and we're part of the Department of Premier and Cabinet in Queensland, we've been very, very well supported in terms of our workforce since the early stages of when this became very serious. So we moved to a skeleton workforce at the Screen Queensland offices in Brisbane, but then we quickly realised that it was much better to have everyone work from home. And so we've now been fully work from home for just under 2 weeks, which has its challenges, but I really have to commend my team who have risen to the occasion about how to keep going, keep motivated and keep connected. And I think that's partly what I said about a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of reliance on technology to keep us connected. And I also made sure that very early on, we started reaching out to as many people in the Queensland screen sector as possible, because we really needed to make sure we were listening to them and starting to respond to them. I think you know that we convened a screen sector task force pretty quickly, which is a great cross-section of screen professionals in Queensland who are advising us and continue to do so. And we also quickly set up a survey for the screen industry in Queensland, because we wanted people to have their opportunity to speak directly to us.
Let's talk about both those things in a second, because I do notice how quickly Queensland moved, and I do commend the agencies that have been able to kind of rally quickly, think about what's needed and go forward. But before we get into that space, what do you know about what's happened? I mean, I think there were a number of productions that agonisingly were, one in particular I think we both know that was agonisingly close to finishing and hasn't finished. There's a couple of others that were devastated by this. Do you want to just talk a bit about what you know at the moment in terms of the picture and hopefully it's not too hard to go through, because these things are actually quite painful when you talk about them bit by bit. I find I get emotional if I am asked to explain every single production that's had a bit of has been sunk essentially by this.
Well, I think it's all been well documented what has shut down in Queensland, which is obviously Baz Luhrmann's Elvis movie has gone on extended hiatus. Harrow, as you know, from our great friends at Hoodlum. Jonathan Schiff's Bureau of Magical Things 2, which has gone on hiatus. They were the immediate ones where crews were stood down, and that's a great loss to the production community that those productions had to halt. We have a couple of fantastic animation companies in Queensland, as you would know only too well, Ludo Studio and Like a Photon Creative, who are both in the middle of producing animated works and have managed to pivot to work remotely, although that's not without its challenges, of course, as we can all appreciate. And in order to keep as many people in work as possible, I really commend what they've done to try and keep their productions on schedule.
And in amongst that carnage, and I don't want to over-dramatise it, but it is just such a shame that so many productions, but there was the announcement that came through this week that just made everyone so happy, and that was that Bluey won an international Emmy. And I just wonder, in terms of these moments of sadness and then there's these moments of just joy that come through. Do you want to talk to that? Because they're such an amazing team, Ludo, aren't they?
We are so proud of Ludo Studio and all the creatives behind Bluey, and what a breath of fresh air Bluey is in difficult times. I'm pretty sure every Australian household with young kids right now is so grateful for those new episodes and those old episodes of Bluey and everything that's available on Catch Up. Bluey is just such a success story, and Spring Queensland is so proud that we've supported it and of the work that Ludo has done in terms of creating all of that under one roof in Brisbane. So for them to win their International Emmy Award this week, well, those moments are what we're all clinging to right now, those happy rays of sunshine that are coming through, because it's really something to celebrate.
Let's talk, I agree completely, and let's talk about how you've I guess, looked at what's happening and decided to react. And I was really interested that, and I don't think it's any secret because I've shared it with people, that I think, we've absolutely needed the idea of task forces, and ideally we want to make sure we're working in the correct sort of buckets and making sure we're working federally on a few things, and on a state level, there's only so much you can control. You had an opportunity to bring together the Queensland community. You decided to do it through a task force and a survey. Tell me, what have you learnt from that experience, and what are you hoping to get out of both of those activities, if you like?
Sure, thanks. Well, Matt, it's really important that when we weren't just talking to ourselves, Spring Queensland is full of really intelligent, capable, caring, clever people who have many, many years in the industry across all aspects of the industry. So we have a lot of ideas about how we can support the industry, but we also needed to stress test that, and we also needed to sense check it. Our task force has done that by bringing us immediate real-world examples of what productions, post-production, the gaming industry, documentary, every genre, every aspect of the screen industry. Our task force was able to bring us real world examples and give us shed some light on what we needed to consider as we evolve our response. And our survey backs that up. We had 564 responses,
Great.
which is really significant. And look, many of those responses are just heartbreaking, and it's why I lay awake at night trying to plot what we do this week, next week, the weeks and months to come, because we've got to help sustain this industry and we have to help put it back into putting people back into work as soon as we're able to. So the survey, which we're digging deeper into, because we not only did we ask for quantitative responses, we asked for qualitative. So we asked people for their ideas and their examples, and we are working through that. There's heartbreaking responses in there because obviously people's livelihoods have ground to a halt. And we have such a proud industry, such a proud screen production industry in Queensland, and we want to see those people get back to work. So we hope to make our announcement very soon, and that's a way that we are going to fast-track development, fast-track ideas. Our programs are open in terms of finance and ideas, and our games funding are open. So all of our normal doors are open, but we've got to look to how we pull things forward, fast-track things, and get ourselves ready to rebound as well. Because we all know that once this does stop and once we return to normal life, which we will, we've got to really get people back into jobs quickly. And that means having productions that are ready to go, that are greenlit, funded and ready to go. And that's what we're working on as well.
I know you haven't quite got the package ready to announce, and you're hoping to do that very quickly. I might just, we might talk in macro levels what's possibly needed at this point. Before we do that, and I just thought the way you brought together the moment, from memory, you've got the games industry. Is it Morgan on your task force?
And Jaffet, who is a Screen Queensland board member and has his own games development company, Defiant.
And used to be a former councillor of Spa, as it turns out. We've got Tracy Vieira, who everyone I think probably knows quite well, and is working with Hoodlum now, and is also on our council, but has been previously the CEO of Screen Queensland, so has got a great crossover into industry. Do you want to list anyone else in particular? I haven't got the full list in front of me, but would you?
Sure. And I hope I don't forget anyone. We have another board member, a Screen Queensland board member, Dean Gibson, who runs his own production company, Bacon Factory Films, which specialise in documentary.
Yes.
We have Gabrielle Jones from the Gold Coast City Council Film Incentive Fund. Gabrielle particularly knows the Gold Coast industry very well, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of crew based on the Gold Coast because the majority of our production work takes place in southeast Queensland, not uniquely. We do support the whole of state, but there are hundreds of crew based down there, so that impact was felt immediately on them. Tracy Vieira, you said, Veronica Fury, who runs Wild Bear at Queensland and does great content in the factual space. I'm hoping I've not forgotten anyone.
If you think of it later, don't worry. And I didn't mean to embarrass you. It probably was unfair. Yeah.
We because we're part of government, we have an observer from government on there, and multiple Screen Queensland people who are tasked every day with how we can help the industry.
And you have the advantage, of course, of a Premier that's incredibly committed to this industry and has decided, in amongst all of the things that she could pick in her portfolio, she's retained the screen industry and is very close and works closely with you and I think the industry to know what's going on. I think the broader challenge is that the whole of the economy is hurting at this point. So the measures we've got to think about have got to be proportionate, I suppose, to the need in the broader community, and there'd be, I imagine, a repurposing of money that could be done, at least in a short-term sense, into projects and areas that will make the most use of that money given where we're at. I'm imagining that's the thinking, right?
You're right that we do have a Premier who's really engaged in this industry and has been massively supportive of Screen Queensland for a long time. We're very grateful for that. The same with our board as well. I should really give recognition to our board because they are not only are there industry professionals, we have people from a wide range on our board, and they are really, really keen to look to what support they as the board and Spring Queensland as a whole can make. So you're right that we do have to look what can we pull forward, what can we make happen now, what can we get into development. But other parts of programs that we expect to announce is how do we support the industry through this time through mentorships or online learning. We have a really big events program at Spring Queensland that runs all throughout the year. And in fact, interestingly, when we asked people in the survey, what are the various touch points for Spring Queensland that you utilise, the one that got the biggest response was networks and events, which means that's a really important way in normal times that we keep the community connected. We do things like coffee mornings every month throughout Southeast Queensland and the state, which actually connects people in the screen industry. So people are going to miss that. We're looking for those ways that we can keep that connection and run virtual events throughout the next few months.
I think we're having a virtual coffee today, Kylie. That's the way we should be thinking about these things.
I've only got a glass of water, but yeah.
Okay.
In fact, we all... Look, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. The screen industry, the arts, that part of culture touches everyone's lives. And we are all at home now, so we are all watching more television, watching more of Stan or Netflix or Amazon Prime, watching more catch-up. And thank God for that, because if I only watched the news, I would be so miserable. I'm so happy to have nightly escape through screen, whether it's documentaries, feature films, or just ongoing series. I'm really, really grateful for that, and it just shines a light on how essential screen culture is to all our lives.
Well, there's a couple of questions that have come through that I thought it's a good opportunity to ask them, and one of them is about the business support, because sometimes I was thinking about this because I was being asked to explain it again to another journalist. Emil Sherman talked about the planes. We want a lot of planes ready to on the runway, ready to go as soon as we can get them off and running, right? And at the moment, I kind of think of the businesses in Queensland and certainly across Australia as being the actual airplane, and it's all of the component parts that are the passengers and pilot and all the rest of it that you want to make sure are inside the plane as much as possible, and we've pre-boarded everyone and we're ready to go and we're sitting on the runway. But without the businesses sort of functioning, basically all the passengers are probably spread around the community, and you've got a lot longer to get them into the airport and lined up in the planes and ready to go. That is a very long analogy, but it is the way I think about how we've got to think about the process. So you really want it. And I don't know if you've thought about this, about the business support layers and you've got some really amazing businesses there that do keep people employed, and I think people really love working with those people as supported, so that you can effectively get the planes up and going as soon as possible. Have you got that dimension as well as development into the thinking?
I love the extended aviation metaphor. Thank you, Matt.
I'm trying.
So we are very keen that people can keep their doors open and be in a position to re-employ their cast and crew when the time is right. We're very keen to support those businesses who have built up that legacy in Queensland. And, we're not the biggest state in terms of production companies based here, but we definitely punch above our weight. So it's critical that those businesses stay in business. And part of what we hope to announce as our support is it responds directly to those needs. Because those companies, they need to stay around, because if those planes are filled and ready, then you're right, they have to be here to make that happen.
Do you want to talk, if you've been able to analyse the federal government's measures to date in any way, that what we've seen, I think, is some initial small business support, and then we've seen the Job Seeker program increase and the Job Keeper program announced. And one of the questions that's come through has been, and I'm sorry I haven't got the name of the person who's asked the question, but just about the options for people to do with wages, if the wages sometimes across the sector are sporadic, and people might be employed quite a lot across the year, but it isn't necessarily that they were employed at a point when the measurement that's been set, I think it was the 1st of March, as to whether you're in employment, then you maybe are eligible for the JobKeeper program, because you can be employed in lots of positions, but in our job, it's very gig focused. So I think, I'm interested, we've sort of thought that needs to be rethought through the creative industry lens. I don't know if you, as a state body, have been engaging with that federal intersect of what's happening, and whether that's all happening maybe through the Premier and the National Cabinet exercise, or if you've got measures that you've thought actually that could be helpful and we're feeding it up. And what's your process essentially and what are you picking in the federal process that needs changing?
Look, I think there are now a range of stimulus packages that have been announced. There are a range of things that people can access. And I appreciate it's probably quite a minefield to know how to access it as well. Obviously, with JobKeeper, you have to go onto the ATO website to do that. We're trying to ensure that we provide links to people who need that information, whether it's at a state or a federal level. So the state of Queensland has made many announcements as well when it comes to small business. And we're encouraging people to go on to the government websites, whether it's the Queensland business website or whatever the federal government is announcing. We want to see people obviously continue to have an income, and that's really critical. But what we should do as Spring Queensland is make sure that we're creating the foundation for the creativity to flourish and the work to flourish. I think that's where we're best served, and that's the best advocacy that we can do.
Yes, I know there's a question about what you can solve at this point and what you can contribute to. I think our challenge as an organisation is we feel, and we are trying to solve a lot of different things all at once, but it's, sometimes you've got to pick which is your biggest issues. You touched on the fact that people are consuming a lot of content, and it's useful maybe for the broader audience engaging today to know a bit of your history, in that you've had some incredibly interesting and versatile and diverse roles across some very large companies such as Sony, BSkyB, Channel 7 most recently. How do you think the broader landscape's figuring this stuff out? Because we, of course, are the content providers into an ecosystem that's also disrupted and forevermore may be disrupted. So in some ways, this is a little bit about what are we going to come out and see once we're able to open our doors to our homes. What's going to be there? And I know we're crystal ball gazing a little bit, but what are you seeing is the challenges ahead for everyone?
I think it's pretty easy to see the continued rise of the streaming services. And what I hope that means is an even bigger investment in and demand for Australian content. And of course, I'm going to say for Queensland-made content. This is an opportunity to get our stories on our screens, which is, as everyone knows, that's what people love. So I hope those opportunities, when they return across the whole of the industry, helps us to grow that even bigger, to create more jobs locally. We totally appreciate the investment that comes in internationally from US studios, and it's a really important part of keeping people employed and engaged and having our storytellers and our technicians working constantly. But I also will always want to see, in particular, Queensland companies and Queensland stories rise. And I wish that for all of my colleagues at the state agencies in Spring Australia as well. We all want to see success for our local storytellers.
I'd say I'm interested because what's happened over the last few years, and I think will increasingly happen, is that Queensland's built a great ecosystem of businesses, and that I think will expand in my observation. I think all the programs and opportunities there are really strong. And there has been a very important engagement internationally with the big studio productions. Do you see that there's going to be a challenge with maybe a more difficult challenge with one of those two halves, if you like? I know it's all connected, but is there going to be I guess I'm interested in whether the international layer to our industry is going to be, in your mind, a challenge for longer than the domestic layer potentially, and then that's got to set up a set of thinking about support we might need federally or other programs that may need to be thought about.
Well, I can see the immediate problem with travel banned into Australia when that lifts and when we'll be able to get international productions back into the country. Maybe domestic travel will lift before that, which means locally based production companies can get back into production faster, I hope. We are obviously big supporters of the federal location uplift and want to see that extended because we know the investment that comes into our state from that is really critical, the jobs it creates and the inward investment. So we're certainly keen to see what the federal government will announce about what comes next in that space. And we're very lucky in Queensland that we have the biggest and the third biggest studio spaces in Village Roadshow Studios and Spring Queensland Studios. So of course we want to see those filled. We want to see those utilised. That's a really important part of the industry as well.
I don't know if it was someone talking to Lynn directly, but she was going through that agonising process of packing up the studio really for an extended period, and I just went, the heart breaks. It's the same. We're here at Fox Studios. This is a very quiet environment compared to what it should be as a bustling, vibrant, creative, productive set of people working. Of course, where I am, there's a couple of very creative, productive people working, but the broader industry, in a hub like at the studios that Lynn looks after it's a really upsetting thing to sort of see those spaces empty, isn't it?
It totally is, and I think that's another point I would like to make. It's about people's mental health and their well-being and their resilience, because that's something that came up a lot in the survey. And yes, if you're used to going to work every day with 10, 20, 100 people around you, or on a studio lot with thousands of people around you, you've immediately lost that connection and that communication. And so for my own team and also for the wider industry, we want to make sure that we come up with some initiatives that help people to stay connected in that time, because look, this has only actually been a few weeks, which almost seems impossible to believe because it feels like forever. But we have to help people to rebound and look to that time that we will all be back on set or in our office all together again. And I know my own team's so eager for that time, because the energy you get and the ideas that bounce around in that environment are so valuable.
Yes, and you can't seem to replace that. It's what I'm trying to understand as this process happens. There's gaps that are forming already in the way I know I'm working, and probably everyone's working, because that human contact, which on one level, it's a little bit of inefficiency because you're not just at your desk, but you're actually learning from each other, and you're getting all the ideas that keep us, I think, moving forward in organisations, and that's what I'm hoping we sometime can get into back again quickly. I'm interested. I know you talked. Maybe it's a good way to wrap, and it was a really nice thing you said about mental health, and I don't know. We've talked about just having a little Zoom sort of drink online and the way people are engaging, and I'm interested in whether you've got a whole heap of plans about keeping in touch with people, but also you have a little routine, I know, to go into the shops every morning and grab a few things, and just as a way of keeping normalcy. Is there anything you're trying to do to keep normalcy in your own life as a final point, as hard as it is?
Look, we had some very good advice from a presentation that was made to our team a few weeks ago about the importance of, and this is about working from home and changes to your life, the importance of keeping a routine, setting boundaries, checking in with each other, making a strategy about what are the things that you will do to look after your health and well-being. From my point of view, I get up every morning and I meditate, which is actually a really important way for me to clear my mind for the day. I go for a 1 hour walk. I do a little sprint into the supermarket to get a couple of things, and then I come home and have breakfast with my family and get ready for the day. Those things are important to me. And I've asked my team at Spring Queensland to give me some of the things that they plan to do to look after their own self-care and well-being. Yeah. And I've had some delightful answers from taking up painting or doing jigsaw puzzles or taking walks, doing yoga. I mean, everyone really has to look after themselves and check in on their friends and their neighbours and colleagues, because we'll only get through this together.
Yep, and not wearing pyjamas all day. That's the number one thing.
Get dressed, get up, brush your teeth, put your makeup on.
Normalcy. I've loved talking to you, Kylie. I love always talking to you, but I hope that we get a chance to maybe get an opportunity to talk again, maybe in a few weeks' time, once some of the announcements that you've made have started, and we can see what the effect of that is. And I think this will be an extended period where we're all out of touch with each other, but hopefully we can keep in touch with you and everyone else this way as well. So many, many thanks for being a part of today.
We appreciate the opportunity, and please, everyone, take care out there.
Yeah, very well. And look, that's it from us in this week. We'll have an announcement out for the whole week pretty soon, I think today, for the schedule we've got for you next week. We love any thoughts you have. Please send through your ideas. And in the meantime, just take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thank you very, very much for being with us.